Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into one of the most fascinating puzzles of our energy transition today. Now, we all know solar technology is paving the way for a much cleaner future, right? But what actually happens when the massive scale required for these green projects collides head-on with the realities of local ecosystems and communities? Today, we're unpacking the exact data-driven frameworks that developers use to navigate this super delicate balance, leaning on some of the most rigorous sustainability standards out there. Let's get right into it.
It's a pretty intriguing question, isn't it? You could call this the solar paradox. See, scaling up green energy globally requires a staggering amount of physical space. You can't just drop a giant solar farm out of thin air. You need land. And the moment you acquire land, you are inevitably inserting yourself into a pre-existing environment. Building these massive installations in ecologically sensitive areas, like the habitats of endangered species, can make getting environmental permits incredibly tough. So ironically, the very projects designed to save our global climate can sometimes pose very real localized risks to nature.
Okay, let's dive into this and break down the two main areas of on-the-ground concern. On one side of the coin, we have ecological impacts. This covers the physical land use, the risk of habitat disruption, local water consumption, potential wildlife fatalities, and just the general footprint of construction. On the flip side, we have community impacts. These are the deeply human concerns. We're talking about how a project might affect local property values, the visual aesthetics of the landscape, basic safety and human health, plus the everyday noise and traffic congestion that comes with heavy construction. Both of these categories demand some serious, proactive management. To actually manage all of this, top-tier companies rely on a very specific rulebook, the SASB standard for solar technology and project developers. Think of this framework as the absolute gold standard for transparently tracking and managing those environmental and social footprints we just talked about. It gives investors and stakeholders a standardized way to see exactly how a developer handles ecological and community pushback. It basically ensures that good intentions are backed up by hard, comparable data. So let's pivot to the first lens of our analysis, metric RR-ST-160A.1, measuring project delays. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how this plays out in the real world. Because at the end of the day, ecological disruptions don't just hurt nature, they directly impact project timelines and profitability. Picture a whiteboard-style project management calendar. Month 1, you're prepping the site, clearing land, moving earth. Everything is perfectly on schedule. But then, month 3 hits, and boom, the site suffers a hard regulatory stop for ecological protection. Why? Well, maybe the nesting season for a locally protected bird species just started. Construction literally has to grind to a halt to comply with species protections. Work might not resume until month 5. These aren't just abstract rules. They are biological realities that physically force construction to stop. To properly quantify the financial and operational risks of these stops, the SASB standard requires a very specific type of reporting. Under metric 160A.1, a developer can't just vaguely say, yeah, we had a few delays. No way. They are required to track and disclose the exact number of shutdowns and their aggregate duration in total days. With this hard data in hand, investors can clearly spot if a company is repeatedly failing to assess the ecological sensitivity of their sites before they start digging. But what actually triggers these legal interventions? Well, the standard outlines the specific environmental issues that cause these incredibly costly shutdowns. And it's not just about endangered species. A site can get completely shut down due to laws around ground and surface water contamination. On top of that, any mishandling of hazardous waste, whether it's the transport, containment, or disposal during construction, can instantly trigger a regulatory delay. These are the strict legal hurdles developers absolutely have to clear without fail. Let's switch gears to the second lens of our analysis, metric RRST-160A.2, managing the human and ecological element. We are moving away from the hard, raw numbers now and diving into the qualitative, human side of things. I want you to imagine for a second that you are a local resident living right next door to a massive upcoming solar installation. Numbers alone aren't going to capture your everyday experience. You're going to care about construction nuisances. You're worried about the constant noise, the heavy traffic congestion on your roads, how this sea of panels is going to change the visual aesthetics of your skyline, and of course, local wildlife. If developers ignore these very real, very human concerns, they invite a massive wave of community pushback that can literally derail an entire project. So, how do the best developers actually handle this? They lean on a crucial qualitative tool called a social impact assessment, or SIA. An SIA is basically a structured method used to proactively identify where community resistance is going to come from. Way before the first shovel even hits the dirt, this assessment helps evaluate, manage, and mitigate those risks. It often relies heavily on tracking public consultation reports, acting as a roadmap to turn potential community opposition into a genuine collaborative partnership. Let's move to and see how this builds into a highly structured strategy for success. The SASB standard lays out a logical 4-step progression here. Step 1, you conduct that social impact assessment. Step 2, you use those findings to actively engage with stakeholders and find consensus with the community. Step 3, you proactively create tangible benefits for those communities through the project. And Step 4, you deploy new, specialized technologies specifically designed to reduce the physical and visual impacts of the site. That is exactly how you secure local trust and those all-important environmental permits.
So the crucial point is this logical flow. All this rigorous reporting, the quantitative tracking of delay days, the qualitative assessments of social impact, it all serves one ultimate goal. Entities with robust strategies for evaluating and mitigating environmental impacts directly reduce their risk of delays. Robust mitigation equals fewer delays, which ultimately guarantees that green energy gets delivered to the grid on time and on budget. It just goes to show that being a good steward of the local land is, quite simply, just good business.
Which brings us to one final provocative thought. If managing local, ecological, and community impacts is the single biggest hurdle to actually getting solar farms built, then total transparency is our absolute best tool. By forcing companies to measure and report every delay and detail every community engagement strategy, frameworks like SASB secure the local trust we desperately need to build at scale. I hope this analysis sparked your curiosity about the fascinating on-the-ground mechanics of our energy transition. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive today, and definitely keep exploring these critical sustainability metrics.